Hey friends, we're here. Finally, the first episode of the Unlaced Podcast. This has been a bit of work in the making, but we're super glad to bring this forward to you, and even happier that I could do this with one of my good friends, Jonny Mckain, who, when I look back on my career, made playing football fun and was just a great man, a great leader, fierce competitor. Played at the highest level for over 16 years and is a former Socceroo and Olympian, where in this episode he goes into some of the challenges he had off the field playing overseas, being away from family, and most recently the transition he's taken outside of football. I really hope you enjoy it, and thank you so much for tuning in. It means a lot. Jonny Mckain.
There we go. JBD.
Welcome to the Unlaced Podcast, mate.
Thank you, brother. Pleasure to be on with you.
Episode number one. It's a big deal. I'm gonna be honest. We thought we'd go for the big gun early, Jonny Mckain, and
Well, you could have thought the other way, right? Start at the bottom, JBD.
Who was going to pick up the phone first? Nah, mate. I really do appreciate it. I think actually one of the reasons why I was really keen on getting you on first is because the whole concept behind the podcast was something I actually spoke to you about probably about a year and a half ago. Around just athlete transition and like some of the mental health stuff that comes with it. And you probably know a lot of boys, especially around the footballing scene, that have been through some stuff in this space, including myself. And I kind of came to you just like, Jonny, what do I do? I've got this idea of I think I can help, but I'm not sure how. And you're pretty open to helping me out and pushing me on. So we finally got here at a bit of a platform we're trying to do for it. So I thought it'd be no better to have you on and start talking about some of these issues and things like that.
Pleasure, JBD. Anytime, mate.
So for those that don't know, Jonny Mckain, a superstar of the game, one of my former teammates at Adelaide United, and I'm actually a little bit embarrassed to say it, but I didn't actually realise until about 5 days ago you were an Olympian. The 2004 Olympics. So I'm keen to maybe get a bit of background on that journey and how you got there.
You've been Googling, JBD.
Yeah, I have. I'm ashamed. I played with you for 2 years, didn't know.
I don't talk about that stuff, mate. It stays aside, right?
I don't know if it's a humble side of you or that I should have known that.
Look, it was probably one of my biggest honours, if I'm open. When I was a young kid growing up, all I ever dreamed about was going to the Olympics. It was never going to a World Cup or Confederations Cup or really playing for my country as a Socceroo. It was really my big dream was going to the Olympics and representing Australia at the Olympic Games, mate. So it's a strange one because only later on in my career did I, when I got a bit older, probably in my teenage years, when I started, having a dream about playing for the national team, the Socceroos. But my dream as a young boy growing up and practicing in the backyard was always to go to the Olympics.
That's crazy.
So I'm pretty blessed to have achieved that goal that was deep inside me as a young kid.
Yeah.
So 2004 Olympic Games, mate.
It's a while ago now, Jonny.
Were you born then, mate?
Oh, mate, I was 11 years old, but we won't go into that. But a lot of people probably don't know who aren't close to football, but the Olympic Games for football is an under 23 competition, isn't it? So
that's right.
You're essentially, you're a young man, if not a kid.
It's an under 23 competition, and you have normally 3 overage players.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate at the 2004 Olympics. We had a guy called Timmy Cahill, who most people hopefully will know, Craig Moore, who again hopefully most people will know, and Johnny Aloisi, who hopefully people will know as well. So 3 of arguably the best players of their, the golden generation that I came through in, 3 really strong positions on the field: a striker, a midfielder, and obviously a central defender. So we had a fair bit of experience and assistance there from the older boys, and it was a really enjoyable tournament. Disappointing in some regards because we got beaten in the quarterfinals against a team that, we against Iraq. They had 1 shot on goal and scored, and we had something like 25. One of those games where you lose, but it's a frustrating one because you're the better team and you did everything right and you should have scored 4 or 5 goals, but it didn't eventuate. And in a major tournament like that, it's hard to swallow. So
yeah. The other side of it is you get the massive high of getting there, and then the knockout at the effect of like, well, that's that dream over, isn't it? Pretty quickly.
that's right. Yeah. And what they don't tell you is, the Olympic Games, everyone thinks, oh, fantastic parties and hanging out in the village, all that stuff, right? Like everyone thinks of that stuff. But because of football, it's such a long tournament spread out over, multiple venues, multiple weeks. You start before the actual Olympic Games ceremony begins, and then you finish quite a long way if you go quite deep. So we only actually had a couple of days in the village. And that was once we got knocked out, and it wasn't, as I dreamed of, JPD, so to speak, having fun at the end of it.
Yeah.
Albeit it was a great experience.
That's awesome, mate. And I think one of the things I was most intrigued about, especially playing with you, was you played, was it over 15, 16 years as a pro, right? At the highest level, essentially, but a large part of your career, you actually played overseas, majority of. So I'm keen to understand, I guess, the other side of the fence of that, because obviously a lot of fans like myself, we look at football as what they do on the field, but we don't understand all the sacrifices that come with it to get to the top, but also the other side of the fence when you're overseas, leaving family behind, friends behind, a lot of people behind to kind of venture into a dream and what you're doing alone. I'm keen to hear a little bit around that side of the journey, what you experienced outside of the pitch when you were playing overseas for so long.
Yeah. My journey, as every player's journey should be, was unique, right? Like I didn't go to the places that I probably dreamed of going. My first move overseas was to Romania. So I played in the old NSL back in the day for the Brisbane Strikers for 3.5 years. And then I knew it was coming to an end. Everyone knew that the NSL was finishing for that 18-month period to form the new A-League, as everyone knows now. And I didn't really want to stay and play in the NPL or the local league, as it was called back then. Believe it or not, the Queensland Forex League, JVD it was called.
Yeah.
Would have suited me, mate. But
proud Queenslander, Jonny Mckain.
That's right. Yeah. But I thought, I wanted to test myself, and I had a mate that was a Romanian guy that was that knew an agent, and he said to me, "What about you? What about we go to Romania?" One of his mates was a coach of a team over there, and I was I was 20 years old, 19 at the time. I said, "What do you mean, Romania? No chance. I'm not going there. I'm going to England. I'm going to Germany. I'm going to Spain, right? I'm going to the big teams. No, I'm not going there." And the more I thought about it, the more we discussed it was, go and have a look, flights paid for, nothing to lose, if I might actually enjoy it. And at the end of the day, that the coach of the team picked up the phone and he rang me, and he was if you've got some older listeners that understand the football history, there was a guy called Walter Zenga, who is an Italian goalkeeping legend, played, I think, 500, 600 games for Inter Milan, was World Goalkeeper of the Year 3 years in a row, played at World Cups, was an absolute legend of the game.
Yeah.
And, I grew up watching a fair bit of Serie A, so I knew who he was, and I was blown away that this guy, one, was on the phone to me, two, could potentially be my coach, and three, spoke really good English. So...
And how old were you at the time? You were 20?
I was just turning 20, yeah.
And if I remember in that, and you may have been one of the catalysts, but at that time there was a few Aussies playing in Romania, weren't there?
Oh, I was a catalyst, mate. Don't worry about that.
I thought you would be.
So I went over the first year at a club called Național Bucharest.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, that first year I was, like you said, I was in a foreign country by myself. Didn't know the language, didn't know a single person, mate, and it was scary. It was tough. I was homesick. I was scared. It was challenging, but to be fair to the club, they really looked after me. And like I said, the coach was really good, spoke English, and that made a massive difference. So at the back of that first year, it's probably one of the best years of my career. That first year I actually played, and that made it all the more easy because, as we talked about earlier, I went to got selected for the Olympic Games. And at the back of that first year where I had, the coach and the president came to me and said, "Jonny, we like you. We like Australian players. We want to make this Australian team. What are some other Australian players that we can get?" And I said, "Well, mate, you're in luck because the NSL's finishing and, I'm going to the Olympic Games, as you guys know. So you can pretty much have the pick of the Australian players, whoever you want.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is they got on a flight and came and watched a few games of the Olympics and ended up speaking to me and saying, we like him, him, and him. So I said, yeah, no problem. So I spoke to these guys, Wayne Troy, Ryan Griffiths, and Michael Twait.
And the NSL, just for context, sorry, was the A-League before the A-League, right? That was the league,
right, yeah.
The main league in the country. Yeah.
The National Soccer League, it was called. So for the older listeners, the old professional league, but it was semi-professional in those days. So, he ended up coming over and he liked those three. And I spoke to these boys and they were in the same boat as me, just, a year later, deciding what to do, not really sure what to do outside of playing in the local league, and said, why not? So that second year we had 4 Australians in one side, and probably 6 months later, another club, Craiova, ended up bringing 3 or 4 other Aussies off the back of, us, I guess, doing quite well there, and other clubs thinking, okay, Australians might be all right at football. Let's go down that route. So, yeah, mate, there was 8 or 9 of us at one time, actually, which was pretty cool.
God, that must have been awesome. I can imagine, especially for you, when you were the first one going there, not knowing the language of Romanian they speak, but not knowing that, not knowing the language, and then all of a sudden having an influx of Aussies to have around you would have been handy, right?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Good learning experience. Like that first year, I really didn't want to learn the language. I'm like, no, what do I want to learn the language for? And I didn't really jump into the culture, I guess. I stayed by myself a little bit, which made it really challenging. Once the Aussie boys came, then again, it made it a bit more familiar and I could understand and speak English and felt like I had more of a little bit of a bond. And then after that second year, I got sold to another club in Romania and with a coach by the name of Georgi Hadji, who you're one of the famous football.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
One of the famous Romanian footballers of all time. So he brought me and a few other players to the club. And only then did I start thinking, you know what, I've got to make an effort now and start learning the language and understanding the people a little bit more. And I think that's when it kind of clicked. So I actively learnt the language, can speak it now to this day, and have some good mates, which made that, extended period of time a lot easier. Because I think if you make that effort, it makes it a lot easier, not only for yourself, but for everyone else.
What's that like for you? I mean, when you get that opportunity to go play overseas, obviously probably the initial thought is, I'm pumped, this is a great opportunity. But when you're actually there and that downtime of not really having people around you, what's that experience like? How do you keep yourself busy?
Yeah, it's hard, mate. I used to watch McLeod's Daughters. No joke, no word of a lie. So to be fair, there was a lot of TV shows that were in English, and I used to watch every single episode of that show, mate. So that's pretty sad. But yeah, it's hard, mate, because the internet wasn't as good as it is now. There was no Netflix. It was very much DVDs, watching TV, speaking on the phone if possible to family. It was lonely, mate. It was hard. I think one of the best things for me was the fact that there was nothing to come back to. There was no league. There was nothing that really was, I wanted to entertain. So it was kind of, look, you're going to do this and there's no turning around. You're going to stay here and adapt, or, you go home and never come back again. So I think that the olive branch of having nothing to turn around and go to was a really good motivator, mate. Maybe stick in and suck it out a bit longer than potentially I would have.
That's amazing. And you would have grown so much from that experience, I imagine, which probably helped.
Yeah, it was hard, mate. Like, I can't remember how many birthdays I've had by myself. Yeah. I can't remember how many of my mates' parties and, birthdays and christenings and major family events that I've missed, that I haven't been present for. So, you look back and you think, I'm very lucky to have the career I've had, but I've also missed out on a hell of a lot of really important
milestones,
momentous,
right?
Momentous things, man, in your life. Not only, my life, but my family's life that people take for granted when they, live in Australia and live near their family and work. They can just take a day off and go hang out. As a footballer, you can't do that. There's no chance you can just take a day off. So, man, a lot of sacrifices as well, which people don't see.
So I'm keen because for people who don't know, Johnny's a very proud father. He's got 3 boys that have grown up so quick. And given their age, you were probably playing overseas for periods where they were well and truly alive. So did you have long periods away from them and Marie and family? Or were
Yeah,
they
so
always with you?
yeah, that's one of the reasons probably the reason why I left Romania was the fact that probably 6 months earlier I had a deal to go to Germany to a team in the Bundesliga. And my club was adamant, no, they don't want to sell me. They don't want to sell me. And I had 6 months left on my deal. And I was very clear that my wife was pregnant at the time. And Romania, I felt like I'd been there almost 5 years. And it was enough. I needed a new challenge. My wife was pregnant. It's not somewhere I wanted to bring up my young child. But they were adamant, no, I couldn't leave. So, my wife was home for 3-4 months by herself at that stage before she gave birth, and I flew home. Throughout the next period of time, we often travelled together. I played in New Zealand. We were always together, apart from obviously playing in the A-League. But at the end of my career, the last 2 years of my career, I played in Malaysia.
That's right too, yeah.
Yeah, and that was, I lived apart, mate. I lived apart for 2 years. So I was travelling back and forth whenever I get 3 days off. I would seriously go to the airport, jump on a flight and get home. It was a 9-hour flight direct to the Gold Coast. I'd spend a day and a half at home and I'd fly back.
So what's the relationship with your kids back then? Probably through FaceTime, stuff like that.
FaceTime. And even then, mate, like I know people say technology's great, but I tried to stay away from it because it made it even harder. When I saw my kids on the phone or they were crying because they missed me, or it made it really, really challenging. So we spoke a lot on the phone. I didn't really want to see them too much because it made it almost unbearable. So for 2 years, I was away, mate, and effectively living my dream and, supporting my family. That's paramount. But that was the fundamental reason why I retired in the end. It just wasn't worth it anymore to miss out on some really, really important family time. And like you said, my young boys were growing up pretty fast. My wife was back in Australia, building a house, looking after 3 kids by herself, and that's not fair, mate.
Yeah.
So got
tough.
to the point where my career was it was too selfish to keep going. So I decided to call it a day.
No, mate, I can imagine it would be so tough. I mean, I always admired the boys who had kids playing professional football. I felt like it was just such a tough task to manage both and be effective in both. One thing I actually thought you did really well. I probably want to go into our time together at Adelaide because I essentially was a kid when I came to Adelaide, and Jonny was the captain of the club at the time. I never forget when I first met. Yeah, we'll go into that, but I'll never forget the first time I met you, and you always used to have a very cheeky kind of grin on your face when you come in the dressing room, and your demeanor when you used to shake people's hand. I never forget it. It was always like a very soft handshake, like you're kind of taking the piss out of it. Hey, how you going, mate? Jakey boy, Jonny boy. And the first time, it's exactly what you said to me. I'm going, I'm new to the team, and club captain's walking at me, and I've got to introduce myself. Walk over to you, go, Jakey boy, Jonny boy. And you kept walking. And I've gone, okay, that's how it is here. So, no, I actually think our time in Adelaide, we had a really, really good time from just a player and performance. But I actually think you had some pretty hard times there for what you gave to the club, and you were leading it really well. Probably what people don't see is how things can get shifted on the head really quickly with change of coaches and structures in clubs and how that impacts players. So it'd be good to maybe get your side of the story on that period around the captaincy and the changeover and stuff like that.
Yeah, so prior to coming to Adelaide was it 2011, I came there. I played in Saudi for a year, and before that I was in Wellington Phoenix for a couple of years. And I was excited to come back to Australia. I was really proud to come back there and get involved with a club that was very aspirational. We had a coach called Rennie Coolen, a Dutch coach, that it spoke to me a few times on the phone and convinced me to come home for a football reason, to play the way he wanted to play. And he was building a really good squad, and I was excited about it. The start of that year, we started really badly. I still respect Rennie this day. He's a good coach, but these things happen in football, and he was the head coach. And unfortunately, he got sacked not long into that season. And as you said, I was the club captain. So a lot of the conversations and the dialogue between the players and myself went through me to Rinnie, and we had chats with him and the club about various things. So once he left, another coach came in, and one, he didn't like me straight away, and two, I had a history with this coach that wasn't pleasant, and he made it really challenging from day one to me, which you don't find often in football. I think you might have fallings out with coaches, but from day one, for a coach to come in and say to his captain and a senior player, "You're not playing for me for 6 weeks. You're out of here," for no reason other than he just didn't like me.
Yeah,
I found it remarkable.
And the fascinating effect from that is like that conversation all of a sudden then goes back into your family and your kids who are in school, and it's like, well, I've got to chop and change shop because the coach has changed. My family, and you were pretty settled in Adelaide. You bought a house.
I bought a house. Yeah, so like I said, the first year was such a challenging year. I struggled so much just to adapt, to settle. Like I said, my wife we had our third child there that first year, and believe it or not, she had we bought a dog. So it was like 2 days after our third child, she decided, my wife, this was weeks before, we're going to get a dog. And I said, babe, this is not a good idea. We've got 3 kids. I've got a lot of pressure on here. We don't need a dog. And she said, yes, we do. So I lost that argument. So we got a dog. Anyway, I'll fast forward this story. It'll get to the good bit. So not long after when the coach got sacked and the new coach came in, I was having these challenges around the captaincy. I got home one day, mate. I hated it. I hated being at training. I hated being at the club.
I remember.
I was really upset being at home. I was in all sorts, mate. And we had this new dog that was digging up holes. I had a new baby that was screaming. I had 2 other babies that were quite young. Mate, it was chaos in my life. And I got home one day and I said to my wife, I said, listen, it's the baby or the dog. One of them's got to go. 'Cause I can't. And we ended up, luckily, getting rid of the dog, JVD. We got rid of the dog. But yeah, it was, mate, that was the hardest probably challenge of my career, if I'm honest, because it was the only moment in my career, and I'm proud about this, where I didn't play football. Every single other time I played football, whether the coach got sacked, during the season, I always produced and managed to convince the new coach that I had value to play.
Yeah. This
was the only time in my 16-year career where I didn't play, and it wasn't because of footballing reasons. It was just because of a personality, and that was really hard to deal with. And I struggled for a long time to get over that, mate.
I remember vividly thinking this professional football world is insane. And to put some context to that, like when I was dreaming of being a footballer, I assumed when you got to the top, it was very rosy. You'd be in and out of squads, but you play in front of big fans. You have this awesome feeling, and that's your life. I got to the Gold Coast and was playing under Miron Bleiberg, the famous Miron Bleiberg. They were playing with the lizard systems and all these various systems at the time. And I had a really challenging period under him. I couldn't break in the squad. I was probably a bit, my physique was a bit too thin at the time to really handle the rigors of the A-League. And then I started to get some games at the end, and I just remember all this talk. And as I was in this happy world of playing in the A-League, this dream's coming true. And then there was all this backward noise of, oh, the club's not going to be around. It's a bit of a basket case, the funding. And next thing you know, within 6 weeks, the Gold Coast lost its license. My last year, my contract was gone. And then I was fortunate enough to get a deal with, Michael Petrillo and Cozzy at Adelaide had signed me. It came down to a pretty good team. And then as soon as I got there, the 3 or 4 biggest players in yourself, Serge Van Dijk, Zenon Caravella, who had a great season at Adelaide, were being asked to isolate and train on their own at that period. And I just couldn't understand what was going on. I was so shocked at the brutality of the industry at the time. It was fascinating for me.
Yeah, it's challenging, particularly as a young player, like you said, JVD. You don't really, I guess, have too much experience or power in those situations. But it was challenging for the older boys too, because if I was a young player and I was in that position, and I hadn't, fortunately been in that position in my career, but if I was a young player, I wouldn't say too much. That is what it is. But as an older senior player, I have respectful words with this coach around rationale. I even spoke to the club, the chairman and the president about it openly. And it just wouldn't change.
Mm.
And it was really challenging, mate. But there's a lot of football politics that exist in the game, and it's always going to exist. And it's just probably how well you adapt and how well you understand that game. And that's why this whole football industry understanding, I like to call it, is such a crucial part of being a footballer. It's not just
True.
If you can dribble, if you can kick a ball, this stuff. It's really understanding the intricacies of football and what it means to be a player.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I don't think I ever got that grasp of that, because I struggled with pretty much every coach I had with dealing with the challenges.
You got it, yeah, and it's hard, right? Like, it's not something you can pick up a book and read. It's about managing the situation, hopefully having a few older boys to help you through, and it's a really challenging one that a lot of our younger players today, and probably your generation, even a lot of my generation, struggle with, and a large reason why they didn't go on and have longer careers.
Yeah. What was it like for you in that period when you were on the outer as such? You didn't really like the environment because you weren't being treated up, but at the same time you were settled off the field with your family. What was that like when you every day driving into training for you?
I hated it, mate. Yeah. I honestly hated it. And I was unfortunately wired in a way that I always went. I always turned up on time. I always trained. Like, I very easily could have rung up and been sick or gone to a doctor, because if I would have gone to a doctor and seen someone, there's no doubt I was going through major depression. Major, mate. I was in a really bad way, but I still turned up. I trained. I did what I had to do. I left. I didn't answer my phone. But it was really, really challenging, mate. Really difficult. And, I was lucky. I had, like you touched earlier, a great family, and still do have a great family that were really supporting. And I'm lucky to have a great wife, and she'd been with me, for the duration of my career. So she managed, the ups and downs, so to speak. This was clearly one of my biggest downs, and I struggled to get out of it. But the support of them really helped, mate.
Nah, I remember you being pretty down, but still, for me, I thought you handled yourself pretty well. And considering that we had I think 3 coaches in 2 years or even a season at Adelaide, you ended up coming out, I guess, with Josep, the Spanish coach at the time, who had that really, I guess, Barcelona-driven philosophy of how he played, and you became a big part of it. And all of a sudden, it's like the shift of the world of, you're being isolated and not wanted, taken off of the captaincy, and then all of a sudden you're in the coach's plans again at the same club in the same environment, and you become a key figure for how we implemented that philosophy. It's it's a strange world how quickly it can change. Things change quick in life. And
it's challenging, right? When coaches, I guess, when clubs are so coach power driven, some of them, and give the coach such a powerful responsibility, it's a challenge. But like I said earlier, it's still hard to understand, and I don't think there'll ever be an answer about why I was treated like I was treated. I guess that the icing on the cake was that there was a new coach that came in that liked me, and then there was another coach after that also liked me. And I managed to show my value, and also I think show a bit of value to a lot of the fans and people in Adelaide that really saw me as the issue there for a long period of time. The club didn't start well. I was the club captain. The coach got sacked. I was getting blamed left, right and centre. I was clearly thrown under the bus by the club and not being supported. But, I hung in there. I did what I had to do. And, I was lucky enough to get an opportunity and show my value, and I guess came out the other side. It was character building, mate, because it's not easy. It's not easy to...
Oh, it's hard to watch, mate. Yeah.
But,
I remember
it happens to a lot of people. But, you build your resolve, mate.
Anyway, so I guess, Jonny, one of the things I was keen to start talking on is really the transition of those last few years. You mentioned when you're in Malaysia and the idea of you were coming out of the game. And I guess as I've documented to you and most recently, I've really struggled with coming out of the game. Probably more, my struggle was a little bit different to you coming out of the game. Mine was more because I didn't reach where I wanted to get to at the time, and went into a bit of a dark space with it of how I took that, when really probably could have, realized I was young and had some time to get back in, but I took it the other way where I didn't want to come back in after it. But for you really had a decorated career And I guess your choices of finishing the game were more family orientated and for the people to be close to the people you loved and stuff like that. So obviously that's one aspect of it, but the other aspect is then, what for you, were you already sort of planning how you were going to live your life, the work you're now doing? What were some of the maneuvers you were making to kind of give you that active lifestyle outside of football when it changed?
Yeah, it's a good question, mate. And it's one I'm really passionate about because I've seen so many players that I've played with that were miles better than me that didn't make it. Were miles better than me, mate. And for luck, for injuries, for coaches, that they didn't make it. And they struggle still to this day, mate. I speak to them and they've never fully been able to accept it or move on. So the part of the game that is the hardest is this transition. We talk about transitioning out of the game, but your whole career is a transition. You move from club to club, you move from league to league, country to country. It's a constant transition, football world. It's not like in the rugby league circles or the AFL circles where you're not going to go anywhere, really. That's the pinnacle, right? You can't go anywhere in AFL. You stay at a club, you sign a 5-year deal, happy days. Yeah. You go to an NRL club, you might sign a 5-year deal, you might move to 1 or 2 clubs, maybe go to the Super League if you want to cash in a little bit. But this is the pinnacle. With us in football, this is really a stepping stone, the A-League. Every player would almost have dreams, I'd imagine, like myself and yourself, to play overseas, to play in the big leagues, to challenge yourself, to earn money. And the challenge is it's a constant transition. So the last probably 5-6 years of my career, I started thinking about it more and more, what I wanted to do. And I was fortunate to have been involved with the PFA, the Players Union, for a long time. I sat on the PFA executive for 8 years, and I liked the fact that they supported players, and I wouldn't have got through some of my issues overseas without the support of the PFA. So I was angling more towards going down that route because I really like supporting the players. There's obviously the agency route. There was, my mind was thinking maybe I'll get away from football altogether, do something completely different. But there's that fear in a lot of players, right? And I'm sure you've experienced it of, if I don't do football, what do I do, right? Who am I? What skill set do I have? Like, how am I going to start my life again, right?
It's like we've gone to the university of football for the last 15, 20 years, and then you come out and it's like, well, do you keep your education in other forms of football, like your coaching or being an agent or playing? Or do you go to something different? That's so scary.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah. So the last few years of my career, I started thinking more and more about it, started doing a bit of study, and then connected. And now I work at the PFA, built up over the last 3 years. And I'm really passionate about the role I do because it's, having been through that system without someone supporting me in the role kind of that I do now, I think it's fundamental. So I'd studied a fair bit towards the end of my career, but if I'm honest, mate, that's why I speak to a lot of players now, and part of my role is really that education piece around players and balancing their career and their life. When I was playing, there was this, you were told no distractions, right? Just play football. Don't worry about anything else. Don't look at a job. Don't look after football. Just purely and simply focus on football. You don't want any distractions. And that was drilled into me as a young kid, and I know a lot of other players were drilled into me. But the more I learn about the world and about sport, that was such a wrong message to send to players. And it was, and still is, that the fundamental, I think, issue for why a lot of players in any code struggle when they post their career, because they haven't planned and organised themselves to have that balance of a career and football or whatever it might be. So I struggled, mate, the first couple of years, even though I was ready. I decided to retire. It was my choice. I still had some options to play, but I ended up, my wife has an aircon refrigeration business. So I ended up coming back, and kind of that conversation we had earlier, I thought, well, I want to get away from football. I could have done some coaching, could have played. I'm like, no, I just want to get away from it for a while.
Got on the tools, did you?
Yeah, mate, I went and worked on the tools. And if you've looked at my hands, mate, these are tough hands, mate.
Yeah, they're not made for it, mate.
So I went and did that for 4 months, and that was really enjoyable. Got away from the football circle, but slowly and surely I got dragged back. And like I said earlier, I'd always had an affinity and a relationship with the PFA, and a role came up that interests me, and I spoke to him about it and ended up getting this role, and now building up to the role I do now, which is really supporting the players.
Man, I think that's so good that you had that thinking going in or coming out of your career to be that way, even though probably initially the shock to the system is the whole structure change of getting up and going to training, preparing for a game. Like, even though there's that release of change of life and you're kind of into it at the start, but that's a massive shock to the system, that kind of robotic life we were used to living.
Yeah. And again, if I'm honest and I look back, mate, even though I was semi-prepared in a way, I wasn't. And the last couple of years of my career, I didn't enjoy. I didn't enjoy because I was always wondering and worrying about what next, right? And I wasn't fully ready for that transition. And if I was, I have no doubt I would have played the last few years, maybe even played longer back home for very, very little money, just because I enjoyed it and I knew I had something to go straight into. Yeah. But, like I said, I was brought up with just focus, and don't worry about having a balanced life. And, in a lot of other sports that works, the swimmers and a lot of the Olympians are told you've got a 4-year cycle, just focus on that, no distractions, right? But with our code, with the transient nature of it, mate, you can be gone like that. And that all too well, right? Injury, form, and then you end up being 25, 26 and having no money in the bank, not really a deep skill set that you think is transferable, and you go through a bit of a spiral of struggles.
Because I think everyone looks at and this is probably for most sports, everyone looks at the people at the top of their game in those sports, LeBron James, Lionel Messi's or whatever. And when they're finished, they are set for life. They've probably got all these sponsorship deals and money. But for 90% of the people who are playing at the highest level, you're probably going to have to work after you finish your sport or your career.
Yeah.
And when you think about the professional, the lifetime of a professional career, it's probably 5 to 10% of your life. So to think that we're so wide on, yes, we should maximize it, but to not really think of what are we going to do for the rest of our life, which is a longer period, but we're going to need to consume something else for longer. It's pretty crazy, but it blindsided me. I'd be really keen to understand the conversations you have now with a lot of the younger players around the A-League, because you're in your role as a player development manager, where you're engaging with a lot of players, seeing how they're doing and whatnot. But what's some of the advice you're giving the younger players now to better prepare for some of those, I guess, transitions and changes that are inevitable throughout their career and post?
Yeah, it's a hard one, right? Because we're all young one time or another, and we have our blinkers on and want to go to training and play Xbox and think we're, Ronaldo or Messi, and that's fine, right? I guess the support we're support when the players need it, right? That's the fundamental thing. They know where to turn. They know what we're doing, our roles, and that's really important. So a lot of the advice that, we start with is pretty much kind of what you said, JBD. If football was to end tomorrow, what would you do? How prepared are you? Are you financially prepared? Are you emotionally prepared? Have you got a CV? Have you got a skill set? What's your background? If football stopped tomorrow, and it will stop, that's the only guarantee. In our world of football, there's only one guarantee. It will end. And it will either end by your choice, by your body's choice, or by lack of form in a club. There's only 3 ways. And I was fortunate that it was my choice, and I still struggled. Yeah. So you put yourself in the bracket of a lot of players that do struggle with transition, that they're not ready for it, and you're one that have gone through that, which is a really challenging thing to go through. So a lot of stuff we do a lot of surveys with past players. A lot of our information that we talk to players is really factual. So, and a lot of the challenges around transition. So we do a lot of surveys with former players and ask a variety of questions, and that's confidential in nature. But the whole point is those findings really help us shape, 1, the gap in support that we have for our former players, and 2, really help educate the current generation. We present this to them and say, look, 1 in 4 players get divorced within 2 years of finishing their career, mate. Wow. 1 in 4. And that's a remarkable statistic if you think about it. 1 in 3 have major financial issues, 1 in 3 have major mental health and well-being issues. So they're pretty alarming stats if you consider, you're in a change room with 23, 24 odd guys, and 6 or 7 of them are going to have pretty major issues. So it's pretty remarkable. And the purpose of this is not to scare them, but it's to show them that this is
facts,
reality.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, this is reality, right? And I'm there to help you hopefully not fall into this bracket or this bucket of players. And this is what we can do for you. Let's start sitting down and figuring out what you like, what are your interests away from the game? Where do you see yourself if you weren't playing football? Because, football is just your job, mate.
Mm.
It's your job. It doesn't define you. A lot of people think it does because, you're a footballer. Definitely. It's just a job, mate. It's a job. And you might be very good at it. You might love it. But, who you are as a person, I think, is really important. And the amount of players we ask, that question around football, and that they see themselves as footballers. That's all they are. So just that education piece, I think, Jake, is the most important aspect. Talking to them, building that rapport, talking about the challenges and the struggles that may eventuate whenever they come, and letting them know that we're there to support them. And sooner or later, that penny will drop, whether they be 19, 20, whether they be 25. And it's interesting to note when that does happen, whether it's lack of form or injury or players getting older in age. But it was a challenging one for myself and probably you as well to go through this kind of alone. There wasn't a lot of support.
Man, I remember us having various sessions with the PFA coming down, and we'd get various speakers at the club to come in and talk broader around, life and, broadening perspective than just football, which I look back on now as tremendous. They'd come in for a presentation after training, and I remember being 18, 19, 20 thinking like fuck this. I don't need this. This is, it hits in the moment, and then an hour later I'm out and I'm living my life. And God, when I think back now, I think what a naive way to look at it, considering especially my situation, which is not normal for most, even though the A-League I still feel has a high volume of turnover of players. But I just never thought it'd be relevant for me. And then, when it was, that unpreparedness for what's next and the nature, luckily I was young, I still had time on my side to really figure it out. But for someone like yourself, when you come out, you've got 3 kids, you've got a wife, you've got pressure to perform, in that space too, which is, I can imagine much more challenging than for a 21-year-old in a sense, because I've got a whole path ahead of me to work on. So.
Yeah, yes and no, right? Like it's challenging for anyone, mate. Like everyone's in their own unique circumstance and that's why it is really challenging, because you might view, a senior player that's had a great career and transition into a role, and you think they're really happy and doing, awesome away from the field, and they might be struggling, mate. They really might be struggling. And I've spoken to a lot of players, in my role now, and
do players reach out to you, let you know if they're not in a good spot?
Yeah, they are. And that's the whole building of rapport, right? Like having that trusting environment and letting them know who we are and what we do, and hopefully getting them that stigma away from needing help. We all need help from time to time, and we all need to reach out from time to time. And I'm hopeful that having been a former player, a lot of those relationships that I've formed or continue to form have a bit of weight, and they think that, he's been through kind of something similar to what I may be going through. Might be a good opportunity to have a chat. So
it's pretty hard to hide it for one as a footballer, but a lot of players do it well. But then let alone the pressure you have on the high performance nature of playing at the highest level to play at your best and carry that off the field. It's a pretty tough act. So I advise any players out there, it's great that we have people like you, Jonny, reaching out, having that conversation, because I still think a lot of codes don't do that enough. And if they do, how effective it is. But it seems like we're making some progression there from a football.
We're trying, mate. We're chipping at we're really just chipping at the top of the iceberg. There's so much more we could do in this space through education, but unfortunately it comes down to funding and having that ability to really make a meaningful impact on players' lives and on people's lives, more importantly. A lot of the players, their football career is pretty good at the club, and they've got coaches and strength conditioners and nutritionists, all that's looked after, but their mental health and well-being side is a huge part of how you become a professional footballer and whether you will or will not make it. And you're not taught about this stuff. You're not taught about it. You have to learn it, and hopefully, the more we're around and the more we can get access to players and educate them and the better our program is, then you'd like to think that would have an impact on the players.
Yeah. It's almost that players now invest so much into their physical performance and physical bodies, from a therapy point of view, but just to get themselves ready to play. But there's not too much investment in, I guess, the mental aspect. And
mate, you look, you drive down the street or walk down the street or run down the street. How many people are in gyms? There's thousands of, possibly millions in gyms every day. Why? Because they want to look good. But how many of those people actually go and sit down with a psychiatrist or someone of a counsellor to talk about what's going on up here and get their feelings out and get their emotions out? Because that is far more important than the physical attributes, mate. And we just, we don't do it. We don't do it, whether it's because of this stigma, whether it's because you can't see it. It doesn't exist, right? That's the big stigma with fitness. I'm getting big muscles. Look at me. I feel great. But inside, you might feel like shit, right? And if we can break down that barrier, I think, then we're on the right path to, like I said, making really good humans.
Do you reckon there's still a gap with players feeling they can't go over to the gaffer and say, mate, I'm not doing well. I'm struggling with it. Do you reckon there's players still worried about doing that?
Yep.
Yeah. I think if I put myself in their position when I was playing, I would have struggled to do it. And I was going through stuff off the field, nothing significant, but just like I was really struggling not playing. And even just my own sort of, I was taken off the field with me at home and then coming back, and it just wasn't a good cycle, but I'd never voice it. I just, live with it and hope it will change, which I fear still a lot of players do today because it's probably not accepted.
It's still, and there's some of the new age coaches that have more ability to understand and get to know the player, right? And there's some coaches that don't want to know anything about that player, and I think that knowing the person is so important, but that relationship between coach and player is crucial. And that's why I think that the role that we play, we sit kind of independently of the club. So we sit in this neutral space where we're a really safe space for players. They know that whatever they talk to us about is confidential in nature and won't get back to the club. And at the same time, we have the ability to hopefully help them. And if not, we can outsource to experts that hopefully will put them on a path to getting better. So there is, mate, without a doubt, there's many players that are struggling, that are reluctant to speak to coaches for the fear of, suffering some sort of fate, whether it be non-playing, whether it be ridiculed, whether it be, just feeling probably worse than they did when they brought it up. At the same time, there are coaches that are really good in this space, right? Yeah. So it's that balancing act, mate.
It's usually the ones that have gone through it themselves that are pretty good at it. The ones that haven't probably are less open to or understanding of it as well.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Well, Jonny boy, it's been a pleasure, mate. The number one on the belt, the first one on the Unlaced podcast. Pretty rapt to have you on. I think that was an awesome conversation. So much. Actually, was really keen to get your perspective on the time we were in Adelaide, which is really interesting for me to understand your side of the fence to that story, because I probably wasn't as close to you at that time. I only just met you, but I could only imagine what that had been like that period. So really interesting to hear that perspective from you. So I appreciate you sharing that and being so candid with everything. And I think the work you're doing now across the game, mate, you're one of the great men in the football arena for us. So hopefully we continue to see growth in some of these areas off the field, and hopefully that translates to better stuff on it too.
Thanks, mate. And let me say, I'm proud of you as well, buddy. Like,
Thanks,
you've been through your own struggles, mate. Let's be honest. It's hard for everyone. So I'm proud that you've started to do something that, you have a way to share your story and show your skills, mate, because it's everyone's got something to say, mate. Everyone's got a story and everyone deserves to be heard. So if this is your way to I guess give back to the game and share your stories and hopefully open people's eyes, mate, I'm happy to help out anytime, and I couldn't be a bigger supporter of you. So I'm proud of you, brother.
Nah, thanks, Jonny boy. I love you, mate. Appreciate it. And say hi to the family, Marie. I'm sure she's doing some sort of construction work in the house. She owns the tools, not you.
Yeah, she is the handyman as well in this family. I told you, look at these hands, mate.
Yeah, they're not made for it, mate. All good, Johnny boy. Thanks again, mate. I'm sure we'll have you back on, not too far distant in the future. So thanks, mate.
Dream big, JBD.